Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, my time. This is going to be pre-recorded, so who knows what time you're watching. My name is Dale Shadbijan, and I'm the CEO of Cape and Plymouth Business Magazine. And we've had a lot of requests about educational content on how to work with remote teams. Some people are doing it, maybe not doing it well or wanting to do it better. Some are kind of getting thrown into it or thinking about it. And after looking around, 118 Group Web Design based here in Cape Cod, kind of by design and by default is a remote-based company. They have great reviews. If you go to the bottom, a lot of the prominent websites on Cape Cod, you might see built by 118 Group. They're around, they help all kinds of folks, and they very generously agreed to do a little presentation on how they're working and share some knowledge. So today we have Dylan Stephen, who's I guess the CEO and also head of the design team at 118 Group. You're kind of like top of the food chain, as I've heard other people explain it. Guys build awesome websites. There's a lot that goes into a website, all kinds of moving pieces, and I really appreciate you being here and sharing some knowledge with us.
Totally, Dale. I really appreciate you having me on. I think, this is a really timely topic. Obviously, we've been remote for a while now, but, with these new conditions, we have a real opportunity, I think, the business community and 118 Group to kind of share the lessons we've learned from a couple years of a fully distributed model. So,
Right.
Thanks for having me on.
Right. You have an office in Cape Space that you also, right, but largely it's remote, and you're full remote. It's like soup to nuts, right?
Totally. And within the remote community, you'll have, one school that likes to call it remote work and one school that likes to call it distributed work. The difference being remote has the connotation of being kind of absent or away or, separated from, given the recent climate, the language we've adopted is distributed.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense.
We're all connected. We all work well together. We're just distributed. It kind of just has a different feel than remote. But yes, we have a location in Hyannis, but we've built a system and a process that allows us to plug people in from anywhere. And I'm hoping with this presentation, I can show some of the challenges of shifting to that model, as well as the huge upsides of building a business that can work, the way we do.
All right, let's launch into it.
All right, let me get this up. You see my screen?
Yeah, awesome.
Yes. So like you said, Dale, we're a web design and support agency with roots on Cape Cod. We're pretty distributed now, but 90% of our clients and our relationships come from the Cape. So that's kind of really where our heart is. Okay. I just want to quickly go over our shift into distributed work. So we weren't always distributed. This company started in a small office at Cape Space with everybody crammed in, working 5 days a week, 9 to 5 at the computer with your standard office lunch breaks and your standard office coffee breaks and water cooler talk. We were your standard, office company when when we started several years ago. We then transitioned to kind of a half and half model where, we were at the office a few days a week, and then we were working from home, the other half of the week. Eventually we shifted to barely being in the office, 1 day a week we might be in the office. And then the last step was full distribution around 2018, where, we go into the office for, special meetings or special occasions, but, we're really a distributed team with people from Florida, North Carolina, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and then even Chile. We have a team member and we all work great together. So the reason we shifted, was kind of a lot of it had to do with some personal preferences. For me, it was I wanted to spend more time with a new puppy that I wanted to, take for walks and bring it out, and I needed to be home more. For others, they didn't want to make the drive on Cape Cod and the traffic and spend all the time on the road. So we decided to shift to kind of a much more distributed model.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously there's some huge challenges with this. And it's not as easy as like, setting up a computer in a desk and a webcam. There's a lot of internal things that happen at the company level that make this, work well. The
Mm-hmm.
main challenges we faced and we noticed with this transition, we shifted to text-based communication, which is a lot different, obviously, than leaning over your chair, at the office and saying, "Hey, Dale, how do we do this?" Or, what's the best way to manage this? Or, someone asked me this question. How do I address this? That is a lot less easy to do. There's a lot less spontaneity when it comes to when you're working remotely. These kinds of
Mm-hmm.
questions are formatted in text. They're documented. They're sent over. Somebody might be at their computer, but they might not be, and you might get a response a little bit later. So the text-based communication is a big shift that people need to, that has a learning curve. The other thing, access to important information. Whereas before, like I said, you could lean over and ask, what's the email address for this person? Or do you have this person's phone number? Or how much time did we spend on this last week? Those questions now are less easily answered. I mean, obviously you can still ask those questions. You can pick up the phone, you can set up a video conference, but if you're looking for efficiencies in your distributed team, you need to have that important information well documented in a shared database or some sort of resource where people can independently access it. So, establishing workflows, that needs to be documented and set up, and we'll get into that. The other main challenge was fostering collaboration and teamwork, where before you had your lunch breaks where we'd all get together and we'd have lunch and we'd talk about what's going on and we'd laugh and we'd joke and we'd build a bond as a team, which is obviously super important for any company is your culture, right? How do you develop a culture while working remotely? That was all gone. Random small talk was gone. And so that is a challenge of shifting to a distributed model. And then building trust. When you're all in the office at the same time, you can see that your teammates are working, right? You can see that your employees or the members of your team are at a computer and they're logging in and they're diligently, managing tasks or projects or whatever. When you shift to a distributed team, you have to trust, have a trust in your team and know that they are doing the right thing at the right time. And that can be nerve-wracking for people who are used to being in total control of their operation. And now they have to rely more on the independence of their team. So those are some of the main challenges.
Okay.
Questions on that, Dale?
No, this is great.
Okay, awesome. So then obviously main challenges, what are the main opportunities? Why shift to remote work? Beyond what we've seen over the last couple months, right? So for 118 Group, it almost felt like we were in a bit of a bubble just because, life kind of carried on as normal. Obviously, all of our clients had major, stress and upheaval, and we worked hard to, make a transition happen for them. For us, we were remote, we've been distributed the whole time. So there wasn't the office space that we had to, clean and sanitize and figure out what to do with. There wasn't all sorts of equipment lying around. Like we were just distributed. So that's one main advantage. The overhead costs going down without having to spend money on an office space. That's obvious. The access to the larger talent pool, that I don't think people really appreciate that. When you're a geographically, bound company, you are limited to the talent in your community, which, depending on where you are, could be awesome. If in our industry, like if you're living in Silicon Valley or, Mountain View, California, or whatever, that's not a problem. You have access to awesome developers, awesome designers, awesome, industry specific team members. But that's not always the case in different areas. So when you're able to go distributed and you're able to set up an infrastructure for that, you can plug in talent from anywhere. And that just opens up the pool of people you have access to plug into your business. So that's a huge one. The other huge opportunity is productivity. There's less interruptions. There's more deep focus. If you set it up for success, you can go 2 hours without an interruption, which is hard when you're all in the same office. And, and without getting too much into the science of like deep work, there is a whole psychology to, when you're your most productive, when you're most creative. And usually that requires, large chunks of time without interruption to dive into an issue and dive into a task. That's more easily achieved when you're not in an office with all sorts of noises and distractions and interruptions. Obviously, you'll get lots of notifications and you need to find a way to silence those. But so increased productivity was huge. A happier team equals better work. This depends on the kind of people you're working with. Some people love the office culture. They love, putting clothes on and driving to the office and parking their car and going in and seeing everybody and then clocking out for the day and then leaving work behind. You have to kind of get to know your team. Others, they want to have a different type of work-life balance where they kind of are able to work more independently and set up their own agendas and, do things at home or, in their community more easily. And so, like I said, for me, it was my puppy. I had a new puppy in the house and I wanted to be able to take it out and go for walks and be there for it. And I kept finding myself at the office. And so I decided, why do this? And so if you know your team and you can set them up with this option and they're going to be into it, if they're happier, it just equals better work. I mean, that's tried and true. And the last huge opportunity, which is also a challenge, is the forced independence. I mean, once you go home, like work from home or work distributed, you're working independently. You're setting, you kind of have to be in charge of yourself more so than if you're being supervised in an office. There are people there to walk you through things and hold your hand and make sure, and to just, supervise you while you work. When you're working from home, you are your own supervisor. You are your own regulator. You create, the success. And so that's a huge opportunity because it's a really important skill to have. And it's really important skill for your team to have. And sometimes you can't create that without the impetus of being at home or working distributed. So that's a huge challenge, but also a huge opportunity.
Great.
So number one, for us, it is communicating a lot is key. Like I said, you remove a lot of the spontaneous communication that happens in an office. That's really easy to have. You kind of remove that when you work distributed. It's much more intentional when you're communicating. And so you still need to have open channels of communication for your entire team. So, for us, we have different channels of communication and we have kind of rough guidelines of when each channel should be used. So, and it falls along what's called, in the distributed work world, it's called synchronous and asynchronous. Synchronous is, for example, Slack, where I send you a message and you send me a message back in real time. That's a really easy way of collaborating on an issue. For us, we're having a code conflict somewhere. Hey, are you seeing this? I'm seeing this. This is what I'm seeing. That's synchronous communication. It's important to have that channel in your distributed team. We use Slack, but there's a lot of different instant messaging tools you can use that you can set up different channels for different teams or different projects, and you can have that synchronous communication in real time. A phone call would be synchronous communication as well. Then there's asynchronous communication, and that's like email, right? So you send an email, here's what I'm dealing with, here's my problem, or this is what I've done, and then you might not get a response for a couple of hours. We use a ticketing system. It's called Freshdesk. It's a help desk solution. where all of the email, we can send each other tickets back and forth. We can collaborate on tickets. For us, it's a bit different because it'll vary based on the type of business. For us, we have communication with clients, and then we have internal communication. Both are, both happen a lot every single day. So we have channels and practices for communicating internally, and then we have, channels and practices and guidelines for communicating externally with clients. So it's important to have both that synchronous and asynchronous channel to communicate. And then we also use video, which is just like this. It's as close as we're going to get in a distributed model to collaborating in real time, seeing each other. Being face to face does matter. I noticed for a while we wouldn't even turn the videos on just because people weren't confident, they weren't comfortable. It can be a bit of a step to like share your video, and it still happens where people kind of I haven't put my makeup on, or I don't look good, I won't put my video on. I notice a difference in the level of collaboration and communication when you shift to including video as part of that overall communication. So the other thing,
can I just interrupt you 1 second?
Sure.
Something I know from working with you. There's live video and pre-recorded video, and I notice 118 Group, if someone's having trouble with something, they'll record it and send it, right? Which is a great way to communicate. It's not real time, but it's like, it's still a great way to help. I always have this phrase, help me see what you're seeing, right? And so I think that's another, that can be kind of broken down into two different types.
That's a really good point. We use video, like you're saying. We'll record a video, for team members or for clients. If I have a client who needs help learning how to log into their website and go through their back end and check something, I'll do a pre-recorded video. It'll have my face. It'll have a screen share. I'll walk them through it, and then they have that video that they can hold on to and reference as some sort of like a knowledge base or resource in the future. So that's true. There's the synchronous video and the asynchronous video, and both are super important for what we do.
Yeah, that's so much nicer than just replying to a message, hey, how do I go into my account and do whatever? Oh, you just log in and then look for the whatever menu. Right? That's a good response, but actually showing them how to do it is so much more productive.
And so much more personal. I mean, hearing someone's voice, seeing somebody, we're trying to build rapport, right? So, a way to build rapport is communicating human to human, which can get lost in a distributed model. Again, both externally to your clients and internally. So we always try and add some of that humanity to our communication to remind people that we're not bots, behind screens. We're real humans, who are trying to be there for you. So when it's not video, it's written communication, and developing your team's written communication skills, for me, has been a huge focus. In our world, we're always trying to communicate complex ideas, just because what we do, there's a lot of steps, there's a lot going on, there's a lot of variables. We're constantly trying to send people information in a way that is most easily digested. And so a lot of people write the way they speak, so they try and translate their, they have a conversation about how they want to respond in their head, and they're typing at the same time, essentially. So it comes out as, the way you're thinking is the way you're writing. That's not always the right scenario or the right response. I've tried to teach my team and shift my team into really mapping out what it is they're trying to say so that they can communicate it most efficiently, using line breaks where it's necessary, proper grammar, proper punctuation, really thinking about how they're communicating, because it's on us to make sure the message is understood. If the responsibility is on our clients to understand what we're saying, we're not doing our part. The responsibility is on us to make sure that our clients and our partners understand our message. And if they don't, that's our problem. That's not their problem. So, once you kind of have that perspective, spending more time understanding how you communicate is and how you write is really important.
Okay, great.
Making company data easily accessible. So, that's a huge part of this. And it kind of just speaks to the transparency aspect of a distributed team. So, what I'm always trying to do is always trying to avoid creating data silos within our organization. So I never want to be the only one who has access to important company information. I mean, obviously there is important private, confidential financial information or things that only owners or executives need to know. But most everything else, I try and make totally transparent and accessible because I want my team to be independent. I want them to be able to find answers and create solutions. And they need the data, they need information in order to do that. So, we, like I had said before, we have a shared inbox and ticketing system. So if you send us an email to team@118group.com, our entire team has access to the communication that comes in there. They might not all see it because we assign things to different people. But if I'm like, hey, I need you to jump on a problem we're having, they can find the thread of communication, get up to speed and address it. Whereas if it were just, individual inboxes, I'd be forwarding emails back and forth, and it would be inefficient. So, a shared inbox and ticketing system has gone a long way for us to be able to all be kind of up to speed on what we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And then the other tool we use is this tool called Airtable. So this is essentially a database that is pretty intuitive and pretty easy to get started. And that's where we track, a lot of our company information, our contact information, our project information, so that if you want to get an idea of, when's the last time we had communicated with a sales lead, anybody can log in and see, oh, we sent a message last Thursday, or, you want to see when the launch date is for this upcoming website, you can log in and you can find that information. Transparency is key. It goes into the trusting your team. If you're going to try and hold all this information and create, walls within your organization, somebody's going to need to open the door every time there's a request or an issue.
Right.
Whereas, when there's no doors, people can flow in and out and get problems solved more quickly, which is why our response rates to our clients and our partners is really efficient, just because, anybody can jump on it and anybody can get them an answer. So, having.
I just wanted to react to something you said. The first step is having a response that someone's looking at it, even if it's like, hey, Dylan was working on this. He's out today. I see what's going on here. Let me look at it and I'll get back to you. Even that is better than, crickets.
Totally.
Right?
Someone sends an email because they're stressing about something. They got a problem, that it's Saturday, or it's Memorial Day weekend. They want to know somebody's addressing it and looking at it. If it's just me who's responding to these things or is able to respond to these things, and I've got a problem or I'm somewhere else, like you said, crickets. But if I can have somebody plug in and say, hey, I saw this come in, Dylan will reach out, in the next 30 minutes to get back to you. That level of assurance and response goes a long way for people, to kind of ease, to make people more comfortable. So yeah, that's a really good point.
Sure.
So, again, rolling into the independence theme, this only works if you have standardized workflows and processes. So, if you don't have these, then everybody's doing things differently. And we try and build a system that allows for flexibility in how you get things done, but that checks off, the same, a certain amount of guidelines that we create. So, one shift I've made is starting to map out our, so in the military, they have something called a standard operating procedure. And it's, here's a scenario, here's a case, here's the standard operating procedure for dealing with it, or like a manual. And I think a lot of companies, when they're working in an office, everybody kind of knows it, or somebody knows it, and they know who to ask to get that information. But it isn't documented. It isn't standardized. And that way, when you want to bring someone else on or train someone else, you kind of have to transfer that knowledge through, oral communication, versus helping them visualize the steps in your process. So, we have this, for example, for our launch process, we use this tool called Lucid Chart, and it helps us totally map out all of our process at a high level, which can look overwhelming. But when you get everybody in on a meeting, you're like, okay, here's how we deal with each scenario, or here's how each step in our process. It's really helpful, actually. I've gotten really good feedback from my team. They weren't sure what the next step was with something, and they went in here, and they're able to see, oh, okay, like, if this happens, then I do this. You start to think in terms of a more logically, and more of a computer almost when you use some of this stuff. So I recommend trying it out, and training your team on executing routine operations and scenarios. So, a website goes down. We have a standard operating procedure for how that gets dealt with. That's documented somewhere. That's not just in the air that everybody just kind of knows. That might work at a small scale. That might work now, but it doesn't work if you're looking to scale your business or plug new people in. So, so that's huge. The other tool, we also try and implement automation in our workflows and our processes wherever it's possible. So, we use Zapier, which kind of can plug into any of your online tools, whether it's your accounting tool or your messaging tool or your email or your calendar, and it can help you create automations, so that you don't have to be manually doing everything. Like when someone sends an email, add them to our mailing list, or add them to this mailing list. There's certain things you can automate using Zapier, that helps make your workflow more efficient. And then lastly, we have kind of an internal knowledge base, again, for these scenarios and procedures. You see these knowledge bases when you're trying to use an online tool or something, or you're going to one of your energy Xfinity or something, and you're having a problem, and you go to their knowledge base. You're like, oh, this is what I do if my modem or my router's not working. We've developed an internal knowledge base so that our team can always know what these routine scenarios and procedures are and how to execute on them. Again, at a small scale, that's not always necessary, because you just, once people have been in a business long enough, they just kind of know it. But if you are looking to scale and add new team members as you shift to a distributed model, you're going to need to document more things than you had originally thought, or you're going to spend a lot of time repeating yourself.
Okay. Can I ask you a question about that last slide?
Sure.
When you're onboarding somebody, do you recommend, so how do you get people through this process the first time? Is there like a master roadmap, or is there like a folder somewhere or a video? Like, how do you recommend, after all these steps are done, how do you, it's like a kid riding their bike without the training wheels the first time. You kind of push them off. How do they get through this process?
Totally.
Or how do you set them up so that they can, do all these things?
Well, so the first thing we do is we run simulations. So for us, when we're gonna hire or bring on a new designer, for example, or a new project manager, we're not just going to throw them into, there's a balance of throwing people into new situations and testing those scenarios out before you do that. So we try and balance them out. So we'll run a team member through a full simulation of a project, for example, from start to finish, and get feedback and show them where they could have made improvements, and guide them through each step, through a real simulation before we throw them into kind of the Shark Tank with real clients. And so, real life simulation is huge. We have a standardized onboarding process, which I don't know if all companies have. Again, I can only speak for ourselves, but we used to not, and then we did, and it's, we just check off more of the important boxes. You get a better sense of what they know and what they don't know. And then also there are all sorts of new tools now. And I always try and not just throw a tool at a problem and imagine that the tool will solve it. It's a blend of, theory and tools, but you could use a tool like Trainual, which creates modules for and tests and quizzes for your team to run through to make sure they're fully up to speed on launching a site or designing a site or onboarding a new client or doing a social media post. If you can document each kind of rough area of your business, you can test your team. And I think evaluating and testing your team, while it might take time and energy and effort, is the only way of knowing, if people are getting your message.
Gotcha.
Does that answer your question?
Yep. I was sort of I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but yeah, it does.
Sure. No, I mean, I should hopefully be able to answer some of these things, right? So the other huge thing, and I think this also lends to what you're talking about, is meeting regularly, but meet with intent. So I think a lot of companies, are like, oh, let's just meet. If we all get in a room or we all get in a conference, or a video, screens share, we're going to be productive. It's just, we're going to meet, things are going to go well. There's a lot of wasted time and fat to be trimmed on meetings that are set up in that way. We approach it with regular meeting formats with specific purposes. So we have a status meeting every week to check in on projects and goals. Those generally range from 30 to 40 minutes. We have a stand-up meeting, which it can be daily or every other day, where it's basically just a review of the tasks and tickets that have come in, the challenges we're dealing with, and any obstacles we have to accomplishing the goals we set at the beginning of the week. That's like a 15-minute conversation, real quick. Hey, how's this going? Oh, let's, and then we take anything else. We have that synchronous communication, and then we take any action item, and we move it into an asynchronous format, like a ticket or a Slack message. And then we have a process meeting. And this is a meeting dedicated solely to the review of company workflows and processes. So that's when I'll pull up the Lucid chart and I'll be like, okay, can someone walk me through what's going on here, what our process looks like? If there's a change in our process because something didn't work, or there was a gap in a chink in our armor this week, we'll make modifications to the process and run a scenario. So I think a process meeting to go over your internal workflows, we do that weekly, and it's one of the most important things we do. And that's what helps get everybody on the same page. And as we continue to develop and adapt our meeting formats, our processes, we're able to touch base and get everybody, keep everybody up to speed on those changes. So.
Great.
And trusting your team. This is one that's like, it kind of all depends on the kind of person you are and the kind of business owner and operator you are or manager you are. I'm a manager. For me, I am a business owner, but also a manager, and I want to run a business, or I want to develop a business where if you took me out of it, it would work great, right? If you're not doing that, you're building the bars around your cell, right? So, and the only way to do that is to trust your team, because they are the ones who are going to pick it up and run with it, ideally. So it's obviously a blend of empowering them and trusting them. So the biggest thing I try and instill in people is a results-based mindset. And that's a shift from the office life. The office life is a clock in, clock out mindset. He did his 40 hours. He did his 9 to 5. I saw him all day on Thursday. I saw him all day on Friday. Once you shift to the distributed work, that entire visibility is gone. You can see when people are online, but that for us, we're in Slack, and you can see a little green dot that someone's online. That doesn't mean they're working, right? That they could be doing anything. We shifted to, are you getting your responsibilities done? Are you meeting company expectations, and are you fulfilling your duties in the company? That's kind of a philosophical change. Do you want to go out between the hours of 10 and 2 on Wednesdays and ride your bike, or go down the beach? That's fine. If you're getting the results that we laid out, when we first went down this road. So that's a beautiful thing. And team members really like that, especially millennials and younger team members. Again, they seem to be more open to the distributed work model, just because they have this different expectation for the lifestyle and work pairing. They're trying to blend the two into kind of a hybrid approach. And so you can appeal to them more easily when you kind of have this flexibility. Holding one-on-one meetings is a great way to develop a bond individually with your team. I do that regularly just to check in. You don't know what's going on in someone's life. Even less when you shift to distributed work. Are they having a problem with, are they having financial problems? Did their dog just get hit by a car? Like you don't get that day to day when you do get that day to day when you're in an office. You can see it. You can just sense it in the air. If you're not getting that on a distributed model, you're just not going to know what's going on with your team. So one-on-one meetings to talk about what's going on in people's lives, to get a sense of where their mind is at, is a huge part of building trust.
Yeah. And it's, it'd be kind of awkward if you came online in the morning and you said, bad news, my dog was hit by a car. It's kind of awkward over text, right? As you're moving to text-based communication. Whereas if someone walks in the office and you're like, oh no, what happened? Right. So, yeah, I totally, the one-on-one meetings I think is a great idea.
Yeah. And then, the last thing is lighten up on the reins. Again, a lot of this depends on what kind of a manager you are, but you're trying to make your team more independent, as you guys are distributed. So you need to kind of lighten up on the reins and allow them to learn and develop and deal with problems and make mistakes. Obviously mistakes that are, there's different types of mistakes. There are like critical, mission critical, terrible mistakes, and acceptable mistakes. So you want to try and keep them in the acceptable mistakes category. But you need to be able to lighten up on the reins. Again, the business I'm trying to build is one that isn't dependent, that isn't built off of my shoulders, like a reverse triangle, right? I'm trying to build one where anybody, I can scale. So in order to do that, I need to loosen up control. And that's hard. That's probably the hardest thing for most business owners, is losing control. And I think that when the perception is when you shift to a distributed model, you have less control. So you need to change the mindset on that if you're going to look to do this productively.
Great advice.
And that's it. That's the presentation. What do we have for time here?
We did good. Just about a half an hour. This has been great. I am really impressed. We've worked together in the past, and knowing the web business, I could see how useful this is. And I think, just thinking about any business, there's a lot that someone can learn and probably should be using here. And, our world has changed. We're going to probably be seeing more and more remote work. So I really appreciate it. I know a lot of folks are going to love this. And unless you have any last words, we will cut it for today.
Well, real quick, because I know we're going late on time, but yes, like you said, the world has changed, and the expectation might soon be that everybody works remotely, everybody works distributed. I mean, when you're going to hire a new employee, they might just be expecting that to be the case. So if you're looking to tap into talent, you're probably going to run into that question. Do you guys do distributed work? Can I work from home? Ideally, you have a process and an infrastructure in place to answer that as a yes, and capture new talent and new clients and tap into new locations and new markets that you weren't able to before.
Yeah. I have a question for you. Through this whole process, what was the hardest step for you, and how did you overcome it?
The hardest step for me was lightening up on the reins. I'm someone who's meticulous. I have a way I like things to be done, to a T, and changing the mindset to, it's different than the way I wanted it done, but it's still done well. That caveat, like that's something I've needed to be more flexible about. And I still trying to be more flexible about, the micromanagement piece of things. And so distributed work forces you to improve on that very quickly.
All right. So one more question. If I'm a distributed worker for a company and my company hasn't employed some of these principles, other than maybe nonchalantly sending the link to the video, what are some ways you think someone could influence change in their own company? And I know that's a tough question, but I'm thinking I'm playing role reversal here. Maybe I just picked this up and I work for a company that we got tossed into our homes. And I'm like, wow, this is great. I want to, what can I do to be the change in my company? Like, how can what kind of recommendations, how have people approached you through the process maybe that was like you found to be effective, I guess? Maybe that's a different way to ask.
Well, that's a good question. It's tough because, a lot of people will find themselves in a corporate environment with like a corporate hierarchy, right? So, there's just kind of levels of bureaucracy that go into that. And a lot of companies are really hesitant or were really hesitant about loosening the reins and letting people shift to remote work. I mean, you see now there are companies, there are new softwares out there that essentially spy on your employee to see what they're doing, what browsers they're in, like what, so there's kind of two philosophies. There's the company that's reluctant to do it, like, fine, I'll do it because I have to. And then there's the companies that embrace it and do it because they see the upside. A lot of it depends on which company you fall into. But if you're able to, have that conversation with members of your team and still deliver, results, I think that the wave of change will inevitably force companies to embrace it. I don't see many companies, organizations, being able to, on a large scale, resist the shift to distributed work over the next couple of years.
Awesome. Well, I know you're a busy guy, and I know you I know how long these presentations take. I know you put a ton of time, not to mention years of experience. So I will let you get on with your day. And if you're watching this, we're going to do a live one in the fall with Q&A at the end. And really appreciate you again, Dylan. And
totally, Dale.
Thanks again.
Thanks for having me on.
All right. We'll see you. Bye.
All right. Bye.